Thank you, Donnie. And one more big hand for Donnie and for the great panel that we just had. These lifelong Hempsters who've made such a big difference. It's great to see you guys. And I am very excited to be here with you hemp folks today at the Hemposium stage, which is my favorite place at all of Hempfest. I am so pleased to be able to tell you guys that our next panel, quote unquote, is actually a single guest. Now, what kind of guest? Who was it? Who could you have that would draw this kind of attention to be able to take our whole time? None other than Lester Grinspoon. I have the honor of doing an interview with Lester via Skype in a few minutes, so I hope you guys will stick around. Lester Grinspoon, Dr. Lester Grinspoon, otherwise known as Professor Lester Grinspoon, is one of the eminence grise of the cannabis reform movement. He was one of the first MDs to start talking about the therapeutic benefits of cannabis, and I absolutely can't wait to have a chance to share an interview with Dr. Lester Grinspoon in about 3 minutes with all of you guys. My name is Philippe Lucas. I'm VP of Patient Research and Services for Tilray. Tilray is a federally authorized medical cannabis production facility in Nanaimo, BC. We've got a 60,000 square foot, $30 million state-of-the-art cannabis production facility there. We're currently providing cannabis to about 3,000 critically and chronically ill Canadians. And as Don says, over the years, I've run a dispensary for 10 years. I was a city councillor for a few years in Victoria as well. And every summer for the last 10 years, I've been doing a pilgrimage, like so many of you guys, over here to this amazing park, to Seattle Hempfest. It's become a huge tradition in my summer, and it wouldn't feel like summer unless I was coming over to Hempfest. I'm pleased to see that the weather has been a little better for us today and better to us today than it was yesterday. Good for you guys. Anyone who was here yesterday and who stuck it out for a little while. Today, the sun's coming out, but we don't have to worry about the usual things at Hempfest like sunstroke or anything else. It looks like it's pretty nice out there and perfect weather to get this cannabis community together to celebrate our personal rights and freedoms, to be able to talk about how our personal rights and freedoms are still not being recognized. So it's just great to be out here today. Let me see if I've got Lester on the line here. Oh, we do. Lester, I'm going to turn you around so these good folks can see you. Can you hear me all right? Oh, there we go. Now we get to see you as well, Lester. I'm going to mic you up. There you are. You want to say a few words there, Lester? Oh, just a minute.
Well, I am delighted to be.
It's mic 2. Oh, he's frozen up. Sorry, Lester, we're having a bit of a tech problem. You seem to have frozen up. Let me try you again. Hopefully we'll get over these technical problems so we can have our interview with the eminence grise of cannabis reform here in the U.S., Dr. Lester Grinspoon. There we go.
Which conversation is next?
It's Dr. Lester Grinspoon's coming up next. No, it's we're right on time, but there was a change in the schedule. If you didn't get the second schedule out.
Is this it here?
Yep.
So now I'm at 2:20?
That's right.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah, sorry you didn't get notified, man. It's Hempfest.
It's not like I had to rush to be here at 12:40.
Oh, yeah. Hey, there we go, Lester. That's better. you know, we're going to have to make do with these technical vagaries, but hopefully we'll get you on here. Let's see if we can get a mic on you. You want to say a few things, Lester?
No, I'd rather have you ask me.
Oh, yeah. I will. I'm going to do an interview. I just want to make sure that we can get a mic on you. There's no. Oh, go ahead, Lester.
Well,
Sorry, Lester. I'm just doing a mic check for you. We're just doing a mic check. So I'm just doing a mic check. If you could say a few words, I'm not hearing it. I want to make sure everyone can hear you.
I'm delighted to be in Seattle. I've always wanted to come to go to the Seattle Hempfest. More recently, my health problems have prevented me from doing so. But I'm delighted to have a virtual presence.
Well,
And then you can,
literally, it won't turn up a bit. Just a minute, Lester. We're just trying to deal with the mics.
okay.
Do you want to just tell us, just do a couple of checks for us, Lester?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's better. One more time, Lester.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
One more time, Lester. I think we're getting onto it here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
That's sounding better. Okay, Lester, do you want to say hello to the good folks here? Hi, Lester. Could you say hello to the good folks here?
Hello, good folks. I'm delighted to be here. I hope we can be here. The technology will allow me to really be here and be able to speak to you. And we can hopefully have some exchanges.
I think. But, oh no. Well, Lester, let's see how far we can get with this interview, and then we'll see if technology is going to play along with us. Lester, we're here today at the 24th annual Hempfest in Seattle. Fantastic event. They're expecting about 50,000 people to come through here today. I think a lot of these folks, although it's been 24 years of having this festival, probably don't know a lot of the history of cannabis reform and some of the early efforts that have gone on. Would you be able to share with us a little bit about your history with cannabis? How is it that an eminent tenure-track Harvard professor ended up getting involved in the cannabis movement at a time when there were virtually no doctors who were talking about the therapeutic benefits of cannabis?
Well, I had my improbable encounter with cannabis in 1966, and it started like this. In the 60s, I was looking out of my academic windows. I was at the Harvard Medical. I am now emeritus. I'm an emeritus associate professor at the Harvard Medical School, associate professor of psychiatry, and looking at what was going on in the 60s. And thinking how foolish these young people were in using marijuana. It was a very dangerous substance. And here's how it came about, that I was somebody who fervently believed that it was that harmful, and who within a few years had an epiphany which led me to believe, ultimately, that this plant was a blessing. It started in 1966 when Carl Sagan, who was my closest friend, when he and I met because of our shared involvement in protesting the Vietnam War. As we were involved in this, we began to be friends, and at the first time he invited us to his house in Cambridge, or his apartment, I was astonished to see that Carl Sagan was smoking marijuana.
Carl Sagan was smoking marijuana.
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you. I think can you guys hear down there in the audience? Yeah. Can we turn up the volume a little bit? Okay, go ahead, Lester. So you were telling us about going to Carl Sagan's house?
Yeah, and discovering that he smoked marijuana. I could scarcely believe it. And furthermore, as I met more of his friends, almost all of them smoked marijuana. And these were not unsophisticated people. I would say to Carl, Carl, you mustn't use that. It's harmful. It's going to be deleterious to your health. And he would go like this and go, here, Lester, have a puff. It's not harmful and you'll love it. Well, this went on for a little while, and as I became more and more acquainted with what he and his friends were up to here with marijuana, I decided that I was a young, arrogant physician who knew everything about drugs. Could I be wrong about this? And I went into the library, the Conway Library, which is a very complete library for Harvard Medical School. And my object was to write a short paper which would extricate the data, medical and scientific data, upon which this dastardly prohibition was based. At that year, we were arresting 300,000 people for using or possessing marijuana. 89% of them were, in fact, just possessing it. And so I started to look at this data, and indeed, I had an extraordinary experience. I discovered that I was not only wrong, but I was 180 degrees wrong. That the most dangerous thing about marijuana was not any inherent psychopharmacological effect, but rather how we as a culture were treating people who use this. And as I say, at about that time, it was about 300,000, of course. It climbed up so that in 2011, it was nearly 900,000. It's coming down now. But imagine that's perhaps between 20 and 24 million people who, at the very least, have had a lot of things. You know, if they had rich daddies, they could go into treatment and so forth. But in any event, it imposed an awful lot of misery on a lot of people. Well, I was so impressed that I wrote an 80-page paper, but it didn't reach the young people I wanted to. It was published in the International Journal of Psychiatry.
Is it on?
But one of the people who read that article was the editor of Scientific American, and he called and said, "Hey, would you do this in a form, shorten it to the point where we could publish it in Scientific American, and I would publish it as soon as I get it, and it would be the lead paper." When I published that, it caused a real rush, and 3 different publishers came to my office.
Sorry, Lester. Just be a minute. We're just adjusting your volume. Okay, go for it, Lester.
the paper was published in this International Journal Society. Two people read it, but the editor of Scientific American did, and he asked me to write a paper. That was published November 1969, and it generated a great deal of interest, and to the point where I was persuaded to write a book by Harvard University Press, and that's how Marijuana Reconsidered came about. That book was published in 1971.
It's amazing, Lester, because that book still feels pretty fresh. Did it cause a big sensation? I mean, 1971 was before the Ledane Commission. It was before a lot of our governments had started admitting that there was research on cannabis that didn't show its harms. Can you talk about the impact of Marijuana Reconsidered on the community at the time?
Well, it was enormous. I mean, it had a front-page New York Times review, the whole front page of the Sunday Review, and the title was The Best Dope on Pop So Far. And it was very widely reviewed, and it led to a lot of my talking about marijuana. I can't tell you how many times I spoke before Congress, and both the Senate and the House, and in many states before legislative committees. It really, and it's been reprinted, I don't know how many times, but it was I don't mean to be immodest, but it was a groundbreaking book at that time.
That's great. And can you talk about what kind of risk you were taking in your career? How did your contemporaries, other researchers, physicians, professors, take this new interest of yours?
Well, the people at the medical school were very much distressed by this. And in fact, ultimately, when I was put up by my chief, who liked the book and what it was doing and so forth, he put me up for early promotion early promotion of full professor in 1975. About 1975. And at that time, I had published one other book on schizophrenia and about 70-odd papers in journals. And both he and I were quite surprised. He was on the promotions committee. He was there. And he came back and called me down to his office to tell me that they had turned me down. And I was surprised. I asked him why. And he said, well, they loved the book on schizophrenia, and they loved the other work you did, but they really didn't like Marijuana Reconsidered. And I asked him, why didn't they like it? He said they found it much too controversial. I could scarcely believe that he said that, and I said, Jack, controversial, what's that got to do with it? What do they think of the scholarship? We're in the academy. Isn't the major surrounding the scholarship? And he said, oh, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. And as I was leaving his office, he said, oh, and Lester, they wanted me to get back to them on what you're planning to do next. And I fibbed a little bit because I said I can't say I'm an intellectual realist, which wasn't quite true because I had begun my third book, the one on amphetamines, which they would have liked better. In any event, and then 20 years later, when I announced in 1995 that I was going to become emeritus, in 2000, I never mentioned that again. I endured a kind of people. I was not a very valued member of that faculty from that on. At least it looked that way to me. But in 1995, I learned that the promotions committee was reconsidering my promotion. And a few weeks later, I heard by my chief, a new chief now, a man by the name of Swan, that they had voted to award whatever it is the professorship to me. And sorry about that. I have to turn this.
I was wondering who that was. I thought there was someone here.
What happened there was the super chief of the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard, not only my chief, but now we had a super chief because the Harvard Department of Psychiatry is made up of 7 little fiefdoms in the different hospitals around Boston. And it was decided to bring someone from Hopkins up to put this whole thing together. Well, I knew he didn't like me because when we were introduced, all sitting around the library, the faculty, we were introduced to him. He said nothing to the others, but he said, "Oh yes, I know you. I read your book on psychedelic drugs, and I didn't like it." So I knew that I might have a problem with this man. And in fact, when I did all through my career, and then when the professorship had to be signed off by him, he procrastinated for 3 months. And my chief asked him what was going on. He said, "Well, I'm going to wait until the new dean comes in. I want him to co-sign this." And the new dean came in. The new dean came in on July 1st, and that was in 1976. And I learned via the grapevine that he, along with George Cora, had vetoed my professorship. The new dean never called me or asked me to come to his office, just on the basis of what this man, Coyle, had to say. He vetoed the. Now, as far as I know, that's never happened before. So there's no question. I don't think anybody going into this area now would have any problem, although doctors are very undereducated about cannabis. Nevertheless, they wouldn't see it as so controversial. So I think that's something. The new generation of physicians who get involved in this will not have that kind of difficulty. But that was one of the growing pains from marijuana at Harvard Medical School from the time I first produced the first book on it. That is my first book. I did another one later on called Marijuana and the Forbidden Medicine.
Hey Lester, did you, after all the battles and the long involvement you've had in reform, were you surprised by how quickly it seems the dominoes are following now in terms of legalization efforts in the U.S. and internationally? Is this something you thought you'd see in your lifetime, or did you kind of figure this was all going to happen in 1975 and be done with?
Well, let me tell you about that. An interesting story. Carl Sagan and I, as I say, we were the closest of friends. I was best man in 2 of his weddings. And we would read each other's manuscripts before publication. And he read Marijuana Reconsidered. And he said, "Lester, I think that's a terrific book, except for the last chapter, except for the mistake you made in the last chapter." What's that, Carl? He said, "You predicted it would take 10 years for the prohibition to fall." And I said, "Well, that's just a guess, but what would your guess be?" He said, "It's going to be gone in 2 years." I mean, he was, ultimate rational man. And he assumed that everybody would come to understand marijuana as I had come from being in the wrong direction to now seeing that this was not only not a very toxic drug, but indeed a remarkably safe drug. So to answer your question directly, though, 10 years passed. Not much happened. I did an awful lot of testifying with other people. And I began to despair. I knew it would happen. It had to happen. But I began to despair that I would never see it happen in my lifetime. It seems to be coming on like a storm now. It's really, there's no question in my mind that we have now, there's no question that this prohibition will fail, will be gone. And what we have to deal with now is to be sure that it's really available to people over the age of 21. And we have to be sure that we're allowed to grow it, because that's the only protection we will have against the government, a government which changes its mind, local governments or what have you. One can always grow his own. So I think I'm very excited, obviously, about what's happening. And it's, the cat is out of the bag, and it's they're never going to put that cat back in the bag. We've got it.
No, it's pretty amazing to see the early data coming out of states like Washington, Oregon, Colorado that suggests reduction in opiate overdose rates, reductions in drinking and driving, reductions in suicide, homicides, reductions in domestic violence, all associated with access to recreational or medical cannabis. The sky not only hasn't fallen in a lot of these states, but things have improved from a public health perspective significantly, from a public safety perspective significantly. Is that something that you would have thought was going to happen so quickly and so immediately and so obviously?
Well, I'm more familiar with what has happened in Colorado. And when you think that there are fewer automobile fatalities this past year, the taxes that have been raised, that are going to education now and so forth, a whole bunch of indications are that it wasn't doomsday when marijuana was made law. Marijuana use was made lawful in Colorado. Everything has gone very well, and I hope that I have no reason to believe that won't be the experience of the other states as they come on board.
Yeah, it seems like Massachusetts is coming next. I read a great Onion headline a few months ago that said, despite legalization in Colorado, teens stubbornly refused to use cannabis. And that was at the news that teen use had actually gone down in Colorado since they'd legalized recreational use. And so it's quite amazing to see these outcomes.
Yes, it really is. And it makes one all the more wonder about why we became involved in this prohibition of this kind for more than 75 years. There's a book called, what's the name of the author? The title is, it was written in mid-19th century, Popular Delusions, about the popular delusions, like, for example, the 17th century Flemish use of tulips as a kind of barter economy. Tulip bulbs were valued up to $3,000 a piece. And he goes into what that was all about and how it finally fell apart. Well, I think someday, McKay, his name is McKay, if you're interested, and I think someday Charles McKay is going to look at how it is that this country became involved in this prohibition And given the fact that we have arrested so many people and destroyed the careers of so many and so forth, how did this come about? It's amazing that it's lasted this long to me, but that is also expressed in a sense of relief that we have finally overcome this. And then the third thing about what's happening now, it makes one mindful of the fact that there are many different ways of using this substance, but there are many different uses. You know, I used to think cannabis was merely a recreational drug. And then, of course, with some personal experience, I eventually came to believe that it was a remarkable medicine. And I think the third area I call, so recreation medicine, but the third one I call enhancement of a variety of human experiences. I mean, everybody knows that if you get a little bit high, an ordinary, some kind of ordinary beef dish will taste like a culinary treat. And similarly, I mean, some of them come naturally, not only taste, but let's say sex. People understand that is enhanced when people are high. But there are many other kinds of enhancements. Allen Ginsberg wrote about it very early, about how he was having trouble seeing what play, the artist's play, was all about. And then, when he wrote about this in the Atlantic Monthly in about the late 1960s, so he purposely got stoned, and then he was living walking distance from the Museum of Modern Art. He walked over there, he looked at the play, and he finally got it. And it's not something he says that was just a figment of the high. It stuck to his chest. He now has a great appreciation for that artist. And many other people find it this way. People who write, who do other creative things, find that cannabis can enhance those capacities that they are using for whatever it is they're involved in. So I think it's come a long ways, and it's got a long ways to go, because more and more people are going to discover how much more useful it is than simply as a recreational drug. Now, I don't mean to put down recreation. I would be the last one to do that. But it is more than a recreational drug.
Now, Lester, I want to make sure that we have some time for questions from the audience. But before we turn to that, I've got one last question. I mean, there's a lot of youth out here at the Hempfest. There's a lot of youth energy and reform. I'm also seeing a lot of higher concentration products being used these days, shatter, butter, etc., that weren't around when you and I had been first introduced to cannabis. Do you have any advice for youth who might be deciding whether or not they want to try cannabis for the first time? I mean, obviously, this is something we'd rather just see adults use. But even if you're 19, 21, or 25, and it's your first time using, do you have any advice on some safe use advice to give folks?
Well, I'm of two minds there. I have always believed that unless we know more about a substance, we should protect the developing brain from whatever it is.
I agree.
Now the brain doesn't fully develop until the early 20s. And so my position has been one should wait until he's 21. He or she should wait until they're 21 to use it. However, there was a recent study that looked at people who had used it who were adolescents and started pretty early, 14, 15, and used it right along. And they looked at these people. I won't go into the details, but the results of the study are that they could find nothing to make them think that someone of that age would suffer in any ways in terms of the development of his brain. So, as a parent, I would rather that my kids let their brains fully develop before they did this. But on the other hand, I certainly wouldn't get greatly fussed up about if one of them should decide, or they should decide to use it when they're 18, 9, when they're in college or whatever. I think that, in fact, the counter argument is that those people, those college kids who use cannabis, use less alcohol. And one thing we know about alcohol for sure, it is neurodestructive.
Yep.
Brain cells don't like alcohol.
Yeah,
and it can
I think
lead
you're
to
absolutely
death.
right.
Whereas marijuana, in fact, I wrote a piece on the chronic traumatic encephalopathy is a problem for football players, because I think the neuroprotective effects of cannabis, particularly the CBD, but in what I call an ensemble effect. I mean, for any medical use, I think it should be an ensemble. It should have terpenoids, it should have THC, and it should have CBD. And what the proportion of CBD, THC depends on how much you want to use it as a medicine without a high, and how much you want to use it with a psychoactive effect, which is also an antidepressant. So some patients like to have the ratio be a little more THC than CBD for medicinal purposes, and others like the ratio of CBD to be higher. But I think that I don't know. I think I got off your question now.
It's nice to see you're keeping up with all the literature, mind you, Lester. Let's see if we've got a question or two from the audience so that folks can take advantage of you being with us here today. Is there anyone who's got a question for Dr. Lester Grinspoon about either the history of reform, medical applications for cannabis, or anything else? Anyone else want to ask a question to Dr. Lester Grinspoon, Harvard professor and an MD?
Dr. Grinspoon, this is an honor. It feels to many of us in the state of Washington like we are being patted on the head until GM with pharmaceuticals.
A little more slowly. I'm not getting the word.
Speak a little closer to the mic.
Many of us in the state of Washington feel that we are being patted on the head until GW Pharmaceuticals takes over everything that is related to medical cannabis. How do you see us being able to progress the great gains that we've made on kind of out of our bathtubs, if you will, while this other train is moving so rapidly towards us? Thank you.
Did you get that, Lester? The question is basically how to avoid the pharmaceuticalization of cannabis, companies like GW Pharmaceuticals, and make sure, I think, that the raw plant and the progress that the raw plant's making can continue.
Well, I think, as I said before, the only ultimate protection is the fact that we can grow our own if we're unhappy.
He says the ultimate protection is the fact that we can grow our own.
But I think that the pharmaceutical companies, they're licking their chops, because marijuana as a medicine is so there's so many different uses which are being discovered all the time, mostly palliative, but enough so that we can now rank it with the other pathy medicines, like allopathy is modern Western. The medicine we practice in this country mostly, you go to a doctor, he's an allopath. But there are homeopaths, osteopaths, naturopaths. You know, I think at this point, instead of calling it medical marijuana or medical cannabis, we should call it cannabinopathy or cannabinopathic medicine. It's a genuine addition to medicine. It won't become a standalone medicine, obviously not, just as these others have not, because we have no diagnostic capacity with it. We have no, we're limited, but in fact, I foresee that hospitals will take this quite seriously in the future, and people will be allowed to use cannabis in the hospital. There may even be rooms in a hospital where people who are chronically ill but use cannabis can sit and smoke and talk. And you know, we know that people talking about their difficulties with other people, it has, for reasons that are not clear, some therapeutic use. So it will. And also, you know, even right now, it bothers me so much. We're going through a huge problem with opiates, opiate derivatives, and heroin. Now, and it's increased so much lately. Why has it increased? Because when you go to the doctor and you, let's say, have surgery, and you need a very good analgesic, the best one is an opiate. Cannabis is a good analgesic, but it won't cover, for example, post-surgical pain or any kind of severe chronic pain. However, if doctors would, in addition to giving me oxycodone, that's one of the synthetic opiates,
Sure.
in addition to that, would provide or give them permission or whatever, a coat or whatever, to use cannabis along with it. Two things are established. One, you require the oxycodone for a shorter period of time to cover that pain.
Yep.
And two, you require less of it from the very beginning.
Yeah, you potentiate it.
Since many of the people who are becoming addicted are, in a sense, iatrogenic, that is, they like the oxycodone even after they're pain. Well, I've still got a little bit of pain, but that's so nice, they'll take a little more. And that's how many. And then they discover that the oxycodone costs maybe $8 or $9 a pill. Now they can go out in the street and get heroin for much less money. This is how, for many people, this whole thing began. And we can cut that down right now if we would encourage doctors to, one way or another, help their patients use cannabis along with the oxycodone. If they happen to discover they like cannabis anyways, we're not worried about them using it beyond the time they need to, like we all do.
Sure. Okay, I've got a question from Dr. David Bierman, doctor to doctor. So I'll pass the mic over to Dr. Bierman. Thanks.
Who is this, please?
Lester, hi. This is Dave Bierman of the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine.
Yeah.
Nice to be talking with you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. I have two questions. You can answer either one or both. One is, how do we get our hard-headed colleagues to be willing to be educated about the endocannabinoid system and cannabis? And the second thing is, how do we motivate the federal government to do research on the anti-proliferative effects, the anti-cancer effects of cannabis?
Thanks, David.
You want to repeat them?
So the first question was, how do you get doctors to be more willing to consider cannabis in their course of care? And the second question is, how do you get the government to fund studies into cannabis and its anti-cancer properties and maybe one of the greatest potentials of the of cannabinoids that we know of?
Well, the questions are very good ones, and ones that trouble me. For example, a survey was done at one of the hospitals here, one of the Harvard teaching hospitals. There were 70 physicians on the faculty, that is, on the staff, all had Harvard faculty appointments. Each of them received a questionnaire. And one of the questions was, would you sign the certificate that's necessary? All you need to get cannabis in the dispensaries in this state, which are open now, is really the same thing that's gone on in the states before. You have to get a doctor's permission. Would you be willing to sign that permission? What do you suppose the number of doctors, the percentage of doctors would do such a thing? It was only 9%. And that means that it's really true that cannabis was a medicine in the 19th century. It was in liquid form. It was called cannabis indica. But with the a synthesis of acetylsalicylic acid or aspirin in 1898, they now had a nice white pill in analgesic, and they didn't use it for one of the two reasons that cannabis was most used in the late 19th century. The second one was as a soporific, and it was within 2 years that the first of the barbiturates was synthesized. And so they now could give a pill for a person who was having insomnia or what have you. Of course, barbiturates are much more dangerous than cannabis, and even aspirin. Over 2,000 people lose their lives to aspirin every year in this country. So it's a shame that doctors over those years became ignorant about it. The last piece in the Journal of the AMA was a letter by a man by the name of Brocade, who was the drug person in the League of Nations then, in 1945. And since then, there has not been another piece until I was asked to write an opinion piece for the JAMA on asking doctors to reconsider marijuana as a medicine, that they ought to really start looking into it, because I was confident it was going to be an important medicine in the future. What happened? The editor of the JAMA at that time was fired. And one of the three things he was fired for was because he published that piece about me. Doctors have a long ways to go to catch up. And one of the problems is now we're beginning to see CME programs on marijuana at medical schools.
Yeah, and there are a number that have been developed now, and that's good to see. I think that's a good outreach. It's good to talk to doctors the way and educate doctors the way they're used to be taught.
The question was too fast.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that it's good that those CME programs are starting to be developed, because there are some CME programs out there now. Lester, I'm afraid we've got to call it a day here. We've got some other panels coming along. I just want to thank you so much for your time today. I wonder if you could say if we could have a big hand from the audience for Dr. Lester Grinspoon.
Thank you very much.
What an honor, and I can knock one more thing off my cannabis bucket list. It's been really great interviewing you, Lester, overcoming some of our technical challenges. Thank you for the patience from the audience, and thank you so much for your time today. Keep up the great work, Lester, and I'll look forward to the next opportunity for us to talk and to get together, as does everyone else. One more hand for Dr. Lester Grinspoon, please. Thanks, Lester.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Take care. Bye.
Bye, Lester. Thanks again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That was Dr. Lester Grinspoon.